32 teams, 32 days. Today, the Las Vegas Raiders. Welcome to a series where we deep dive on every NFL team's offseason from the very beginning, when head coaches are being hired, all the way to present day with preseason happening, with one goal: to look ahead to the 2025 season and see how each team will perform. Here's a list of videos that we're going to be dropping for 32 straight days, from August 1st to September 1st. I encourage you guys to hit that subscribe button, and we're going to be dropping those videos on that respective day. With it being 32 videos, we do have to film a lot of this in advance, so this particular video is being filmed on July 30th. Let's kick off the deep dive of the Las Vegas Raiders with a new man in charge. That is the head coach, Pete Carroll, who takes a year off last season, and now he's back. After he was let go, mutually decided to move on, however you want to look at it, with the Seattle Seahawks. He took a year off. Now he's with Vegas, taking over for Antonio Pierce, who was fired earlier this year. Prior to him, it was Josh McDaniels. Prior to him, it was John Gruden. So this organization is looking for some stability within the head coach, and we believe that Pete Carroll can bring that, and he'll be around with the Vegas Raiders for quite some time. The coordinators that he brings in, very interesting. So the defensive coordinator, Patrick Graham, survives yet again another regime. So he's with Josh McDaniels, then he was with Antonio Pierce, and Pete Carroll decided to retain him again. It's fair to say that Graham is on thin ice. So if he does not finish statistically, as far as defense goes, within the top half of the league, I would say that he probably is going to be let go by Vegas, because he would be the common denominator in the subpar performances that the Raiders defense has had in recent years. The offensive coordinator, Chip Kelly, back in the NFL. 2016 was the last time that we saw him, when he was a head coach of the 49ers. Prior to that, the Philadelphia Eagles. Took some time in college, was a head coach for UCLA for some time. Last year, Ohio State was the offensive coordinator. Now he's back under Pete Carroll, and his style of offense, we know about this, where it's very fast-paced, no huddle, and it's a high volume of plays. This is why we predict Geno Smith, the new starting quarterback, getting around maybe 570, 580, maybe even pushing 600 passing attempts this year. And Ashton Jeanty, they can still have a high volume runner, having 300 plus rushing attempts this season. So Chip Kelly, his offense will be very fun to watch. We'll see how the players that they added perform, as they do have a new quarterback in town, which brings us to our free agency adds and losses. Geno Smith, who had a resurgence in Seattle, and give credit to Pete Carroll. So Pete Carroll wants to bring his guy in to be the starting quarterback after the combination of Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder, Aiden O'Connell. That didn't work out. Aiden O'Connell is going to be the QB2. Raheem Mostert signed as good depth. I counted a total of 7 potential starters that they added, and that is Geno Smith, Alex Kappa, Leki Fotu, Jermaine Pratt, Elena Roberts, Jeremy Chin, and Eric Stokes. All these guys we expect to be starters, and we'll talk about that when we talk about the depth chart. The players that you lost, they are replaceable. Like I said, 7 starters that they signed in free agency, and then more in the draft. The biggest loss, however, this offseason was Christian Wilkins, which happened in late July. Their big defensive tackle that they signed last season to a 5-year contract, $83 million guaranteed, $110 million contract. They released him, and they're able to void the remaining $35.2 million because of his approach to rehabbing his foot injury. They said that this was not the rehab plan that we had laid out for him, so he's not following that plan, or maybe he's not making an effort in good faith to try to make it back into the field on time. As of right now, all we know is that he was released because in the locker room, he kissed a player on his head, a teammate. That teammate took offense to that. The rumor mill out there is saying that this was just the latest offense in a multitude of things. So this was kind of like the cherry on top. So in a football perspective, you lose your big defensive tackle, your big signing that you had last season, and comes in Adam Butler, but they also signed Leki Fotu, thankfully, who played with the New York Jets. He's going to be that starting defensive tackle in that 4-3 defense. But they made a big splash in the NFL draft. We talked about the 7 starters that they added in free agency, added a couple more with that draft, with the biggest name being Ashton Jeanty. They could have gone a multitude of directions with this. They could have gone offensive line, Kelvin Banks, Armand Membu, but they have a lot of faith, it seems like, with DJ Calais, who was actually pretty decent last season, in my opinion. They could have gone the defensive route, Michael Williams, Jalen Walker, those 2 Georgia defenders. but they decided to go the route of running back, give that offensive boost, which is very, very smart for a team that was ranked 32nd overall, dead last in rushing last season with only 1,300 yards rushing. Their leading rusher being Alexander Madison, who only had 420 yards on the season. So that combination of Madison, Zamir White, Sincere McCormick, they do not want to replicate that. They want one solid guy that can carry the rock 300-plus times a year, i.e. Marshawn Lynch, a Pete Carroll guy. Their second-round pick, Jack Bech, is very interesting. The idea was there. We need a wide receiver 2. For Bech, however, we don't expect him to be that wide receiver 2 or even that wide receiver 3, and we'll talk about that in just a bit. But moving to the third round, Darian Porter, Iowa State cornerback, another potential starter for the Raiders. We expect him to start right away opposite of Eric Stokes. Let's look forward to the fourth round with another wide receiver that they added from Tennessee, and that is Dante Thornton Jr., who's known as this big-bodied speedster that can just zoom past people, beat them, leave them in the dust. From people that were in attendance watching Dante Thornton play in camp on June 10th, he's been one of, if not the most impressive rookie in OTAs. On June 20th, he's been running with first-team offense in OTAs. And on June 21st, someone said that he is becoming a top target for Geno Smith. All that is being said about Thornton Jr. Not much is being said about Jack Bech. So the mentality was there. They needed that wide receiver. It just ended up being that they got that guy in the fourth round, not in the second. Let's look at that projected offense, the depth chart for the 2025 season. Geno Smith, no questions about it. He will be the brand new starter for the Las Vegas Raiders. Adam Cano will be backing him up. Moving on to the skill position players, at running back, Ashton Jeanty, no questions about it. He'll be someone that will be carrying the rock 300-plus times a year. Raheem Mostert, we expect to be the backup running back. Sincere McCormick, we expect to be the RB3 because of the quote-unquote emergence that he had last season. Played a little bit better than Zamir White, who could be on thin ice by the time the cut deadline comes around. Will Zamir White make the final roster? With the wide receivers, we still expect it to be Jacoby Myers, who had a lot of success on the outside last season. Played a little bit of slot, but we expect him to be the outside receiver. Opposite of that, Dante Thornton, we also expect him to be outside just because of his size. 6'5", he can run those 9 routes. Trey Tucker, 5'9", 185, can be shifty, has a lot of speed. You can utilize him a lot in the slot, so that's how we expect it to play out for those 3 wide receivers. Brock Bowers, holy crap, the season that he had last year, we have no idea if that was his floor or his ceiling just because he's only played 1 season. It's fair to assume, we'll get to it when we talk about stat projections, that he's going to have a season that's very similar to the one that he had last year. So he'll be the most targeted tight end, most targeted receiver on this team. Then to the offensive line, you have the cornerstone, solid player in Colton Miller at left tackle. He's been solid since 2018. Dylan Parham, Jackson Powers-Johnson, who's also been a high draft pick for the Raiders in years past. Alex Kappa is that big free agent signing. He comes over from the Cincinnati Bengals. DJ Glaze, who actually was pretty decent, I would say, last year as a rookie. We expect him to be the starter yet again this season. He'll be playing right tackle. Moving to the defense, that defensive line, yes, it took a big hit with Christian Wilkins, but just in time they signed Leki Fotu, who will now be thrusted into that starting position opposite of Adam Butler. Max Crosby, we know, is that cornerstone on defense. Moving on to linebackers, Elandon Roberts, who they signed from the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's now the starting middle linebacker. Jermaine Pratt, what a gift Jermaine Pratt was released on June 10th, then was signed by the Raiders a day later on June 11th for 1 year, $4.25 million. Get a starter, at least for this season, for that much money. Pretty good deal. What a gift for the Las Vegas Raiders. And then Tommy Eichenberg is the other linebacker. Moving on to the secondary, a lot of changes here. Isaiah Polamalu is going to be the only consistent for free safety, but Jeremy Chinn, Darian Porter, and Eric Stokes, all new faces for the Las Vegas Raiders. Chinn comes in from the Commanders, Stokes from the Packers, and then Darian Porter, who they drafted. We'll see how that secondary plays out. And the special teamers led by their all-pro specialists and the kicker and the punter, Daniel Carlson and AJ Cole. Now, the kick returner and the punt return, this is interesting because Trey Tucker, with him, I guess, technically shifting away from being wide receiver 2 after the Devontae Adams trade last season to the wide receiver 3 spot behind Dante Thornton Jr. We expect him to take a lot more run at special teams. With the kick returner, Tommy Malott, now he was a quarterback at Montana State. He transitioned to wide receiver when he was signed by the Raiders. We expect him to be the starting kick returner because he has some experience as a kick returner, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's behind Trey Tucker on the depth chart. Now let's get into the stat projections for the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. With Geno Smith, 4,300 yards passing, 25 passing touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Pretty solid season for Geno, and a typical season for Geno Smith under Pete Carroll when he was a full-time starter for 2 years. On average, it's about 26 touchdowns to 10 interceptions. So right on par with what we expect Geno to put up. For the running back, Ashton Jeanty, 300 rushing attempts is what we project, 1,300 yards, 10 touchdowns, averaging 4.4 yards per carry. This is all based off of Marshawn Lynch, like how Pete Carroll utilized Marshawn Lynch in the passing game versus the running game. You might be looking at this and it's like, okay, well, Ashton Jeanty averaged so many yards per carry last year at Boise State. Why is he only averaging 4.4? It's the NFL. It's his rookie year. We don't know what to expect. This is still a very good season. For the wide receivers, the top 3 guys, wide receiver 1, Jacoby Myers, 2, Dante Thornton, and a 3, Trey Tucker. Myers, heavily targeted, 119 targets. Last year, he put up over 1,000 yards receiving. We don't expect that this year just because of the addition of Thornton. They didn't really have a wide receiver 2 in that offense. They didn't really have a running back as well, so they had to pass the ball more. They had to play from behind. For Thornton, he's going to be that speedster. On the outside, 16 yards per reception, 800 yards receiving, 86 targets, and 5 receiving touchdowns. For Trey Tucker, 40 receptions, 528 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Brock Bowers, the tight end. Like we mentioned earlier in the video, we expect him to have a season that's very similar to the one that he put up last year. 150 targets, 111 receptions for 1,200 yards, and 7 receiving touchdowns. So slightly better than what he did last year. And the reason for that, again, we don't know if last year was his floor or if it were his ceiling. We don't have another year to compare it to. So the only thing that we can do is compare it to last year. Expect him to have the same kind of season. The Raiders offense only got better. To wrap up the video, we're going to give you a record projection. And I don't like to just give one record and say anything outside of that is wrong. I like to give a window, a floor, and a ceiling. Minimum, they win this many games, maximum, this many. And it's all dependent on something that I like to call swing games. And I'll explain that in just a bit. But the floor, minimum, I have them finishing 7-10, maximum 11-6, making the postseason via a division victory. How could that possibly be with the Kansas City Chiefs in that division? Well, it goes back to me mentioning swing games, the games that could go back and forth. All 3 division opponents, those 6 games for the Raiders, could go back and forth. They could split with the Broncos, split with the Chargers, split with the Chiefs. They could go 11-6. The Chiefs go 11-6. They tied, but the Raiders, they could have the tiebreaker and win the division. Listen, I'm not saying that's what I expect, but I'm saying ceiling. It's a possibility that they could win the AFC West. Where I expect them, though, is to finish 8-9. The other swing games I have on their schedule, the Patriots, the Bears, the Jaguars, the Browns, the Texans, the Cowboys. But to sum up the Raiders in 2025, they are a middle-of-the-pack team that can make a push for a wildcard spot. And if they don't make the postseason, they are still a competitive team that will keep every game close and should not be taken lightly. But if you agree or disagree, regardless, leave a comment down below. I would love to hear your thoughts on where you feel like the Raiders are going to finish, how they're going to do, not just record projections, but stats or anything that I mentioned in this video. Leave a comment down below. I would love to discuss with all of you guys. Stay tuned for tomorrow's video as we continue this 32-team series as we talk about the Dallas Cowboys. So make sure you guys subscribe to this channel so you can stay up to date when we drop a video every day at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I'll see you tomorrow.